Okay, we want to welcome you back to another episode of Between Us and Y'all. I'm Yasmin,
I'm Nafis.
and this is another episode of Between Us and Y'all, a safe space for mothers and their young adult sons to have good conversations. We're happy to be back, and we're grateful for the support we've received thus far. Today, we have some guests that we're going to introduce shortly. We are going to be continuing the conversation of navigating and utilizing resources. Nafis and I started the conversation already. Our guests today are going to share in a second part of the conversation about this particular topic, and they're going to be focusing specifically on understanding what's known as an Esusu and religious versus human resources as it relates to navigating and utilizing resources. So before we get into the topic, let's let our guests introduce themselves.
Hey, good evening. I'm Yinka.
I'm Ayinde, her son.
We are here from Atlanta. Ayinde is my oldest son. He's the third and fifth of five children. And thank you for inviting us to join in the podcast, join the community and the family in this discussion. We really appreciate it.
All right. And Ayinde, what grade are you in now?
I'm in 10th grade. I was about to say 11th because school is kind of out of whack, but yeah, I'm in 10th grade.
All right, cool. We wish you luck with the next school year. Hopefully everything will be as normal as it can be, and we wish you luck with that. As we usually do on every episode, we like to advertise for local businesses, and today our guests are actually going to be telling us a little bit about her business. So, can you tell us about your business?
Sure. My floral business is called Ruby Royal Floral. We do floral arrangements and event design. So for the floral arrangement, we mostly focus in on holidays. So we just had the Mother's Day celebration and holiday. So you can call or email or IG instant message over Instagram if you are wanting something outside of a holiday. And our floral arranging is generally tied in and connected to holidays. And then, of course, any event you're having, birthdays, weddings, anniversary, just because I love you, a dinner celebration that you want to make extra special, we do all of those things. So you can contact us for that. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
What's the contact information? How can they reach you?
770-882-9515, and Instagram is at Ruby Royal Floral. Again, at Ruby Royal Floral.
All right, cool. Thank you so much for sharing. It's always great when we have guests that have businesses. Sometimes people just don't know that someone else has a business, but I'm sure everyone loves flowers, all the time. So you can support Mama Yinka with her business, flowers, if you're interested. Hopefully you are. And I've seen her arrangements myself. They're pretty awesome. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. So we're going to jump right into our questions. As we normally do with all of our guests, we like to start with our general standard first question. And this particular question has to do with a motto. And so our family motto is work hard, pray hard, love hard, and play hard. We try to incorporate that in everything that we do in every area of our lives. Do you all have a family motto? And if so, what is it?
So Ayinde and I were discussing this. We had a family motto.
We don't.
We don't.
We don't know what it is anymore.
We can't remember it. So we appreciate the question and the reminder to revitalize that as a practice. We see and saw that you all utilize your motto to guide you all's life decisions and how you move in your life, and that's really awesome and great. So yeah, we're gonna pick that back up. So Ayinde and I worked on the motto. You all know it's a lot of us over here. So it's this new motto is a work in progress. This is what he and I came up with. We're gonna run it across the run it with the other siblings and see, what they say and think, and it might get expanded or reduced or something like that. So this is what we came up with, the two of us. So.
Okay, so we had 7 principles to live by. Live life well, have fun, be happy, make mistakes, own them and learn with them, travel and explore yourself in the world, eat well and be healthy.
Wow, I love that motto. That's really, really, really versatile, and it allows you to be able to be free and to make mistakes. It's a real good one to have on there because as we're growing, you need to have the freedom to be able to do that. So that's dope. I think it's a pretty good model. And I support y'all in revamping that and making sure everybody else is on board with it. So good luck with it. All right, cool. So we're going to jump into our next question. Nafis is going to be asking.
The next question is, as we continue our conversation on navigating resources, is it important to be sure we have defined what resources are? Please share how you and your son identify those resources.
Me and my mom, actually, we came up with different definitions. I kept it simple. Anything that has the potential to add value to your life.
Yeah, and so for me, resources are people, businesses, thoughts, ideas, practices, investments, any work or job that add joy, value, and or financials to your life.
Wow, I love those definitions. Did you want to add anything about your definition of resources? And see, you guys covered all of the ones we would say also. I really like those. So thank you for sharing those. All right, and for our listeners, I hope that you were paying attention to the definitions that this family offered, because they cover a lot of different areas of our lives. And oftentimes, if we're not identifying what our resources are, it's hard to support them and it's hard to cultivate them as well, because you really don't know what they are. You might be overlooking something. So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
For our next question, when we discuss the idea of resources within a community, some community members participate in approaching monetary strategies collectively. We've heard this process being called an esusu. Can you explain what an esusu is?
So I know roughly what an esusu is. It's where you get together with your community and you like put money in at the agreed time. You draw ballots and whoever's chosen gets all the money, and you do this kind of in a cycle so that everybody has a chance to win and grow. And yeah, that's how I understand it.
Yeah, so just to add to Ayinde's definition, it's a group of people, usually community or family, with a set amount of money that they put in on a set date. And let's say it's 10 units or 10 people, then the cycle is determined by how many people are participating. And then you put your money in, and then he said by ballot, but there are actually different ways to determine who will get their Esusu draw at what time. I've participated in different Esusus in different ways. Sometimes there's a immediate need that a participant might have. And so they might come to the group, and especially when it's community and family, and say, hey, we're doing the Esusu and I lost my job, and, I know I can do my X amount of dollars, and it would really help me to be the first person to receive the draw. So sometimes it works that way. Sometimes, like he said, as a ballot. And sometimes I actually have participated, a few times, where people have requested to be the last person to receive the draw, because they're working on building in a particular way. They, it's 3 people I can think of specifically that have asked to be the very last person, and then they gave, for their own particular reasons. So people can request. It can be a draw, or those are the 2 ways generally that I know it to happen.
Mm-hmm. Ayinde, or was that it? Does it seem like you're going to say something?
Well, I mean, and this is usually a thing between you and community. So I guess adapt it to your needs is what I would add to that. Yeah, adapt it to your needs. It's a case by case basis. So yeah, that's what I would say.
All right, and so I know that the word Esusu for our listeners may be new for some of our listeners. Some people may not have heard that word before, but I'm sure our listeners have heard in the Black community what's known as a rent party. And that's something that's been going on for years in the South and on the West Coast, everywhere, where we've had these parties where the idea is, it might not even be rent. It might be called a rent party, but we're coming together to give our money in a pot for a particular reason and a particular need that someone has. And that's something that, is very beneficial for families that are in need. Maybe like Mama Yinka said, somebody lost their job, or maybe they're getting ready to have a baby, or whatever it is, but we are identifying that we have the resources with our money to offer, to this particular family, or maybe food as well. Usually you can't come to a rent party with no food. So for our listeners, if you get invited to a Black rent party, you don't show up with no food, then you're probably not going to get invited again. So
can I add one thing? I just remembered something that's actually part of my family history. My great-great-grandmother had a restaurant called Half Moon Cafe. And just as on my father's side, I wasn't as connected to them, but as I was doing family history and study, I learned that one of the things she did to promote her business is like the last Friday, I can't remember specifically when, but she baked cakes. And so let's say that the slice of cake was $5. She put a $20 bill, wrapped up underneath like maybe 4 or 5 slices of cake. And so it was kind of like a lottery, but everybody would come to buy the slice of cake in hopes that they get one of the slices that had the $20 bill wrapped underneath. So it's not exactly a sou-sou. And when you said rent party, it reminded me of that story about my great-great-grandmother and the Half Moon Cafe. Like that was something she did to promote and have people, patronize her business with her pastries and cakes. So.
Yeah, and I wish I could have come to one of them parties. It made me think about, with Mardi Gras, with king cake, that idea that they have with the baby that's baked into the cake, and everybody's looking for the baby, but it's not necessarily that good because you have to host the party if you get the baby. Okay. The cake, it's supposedly that you have to host the next party the next year. So I'd rather come to your grandmother's party. Cake is for that baby, the baby only. All right, so.
With the next question, you kind of already touched on it, Mama Yinka, but have you participated in Esusu? And please explain it, or just
tell us about your experience, the Esusus you participated in.
I participated in a few. One that was a little different. We were focused on purchasing property. It was right when the 2008 financial crash happened, and the Mazimoyos, the film orchestra, they actually originated it and came up with the idea. And so, as most of us know, if we're old enough, at the 2008 market crash, a lot of us lost our homes, which for Black people, that's often the seed of our financial building, often having a home, owning a home. And so the thought was, if we could get ourselves together and generate enough income, because the housing prices went down. So the thought was to put money into a pot, and then each person who would get the pot. And it was a 3-year, I'm kind of cloudy on the details because it was like 08, but I want to say it was a 3-year process, and there were 10 units. And so the payout, you would have enough money to purchase a house just straight out at that time. And one thing that helped and worked really well in that Esusu process was we used the Warriors, Hills, and Builders process as a group. Some of us knew each other really well. Some of us were new to each other. And it was just a means to knit and grow community, knit and grow trust. Anytime you're building anything, I have 5 children and they're all growing up in the same household. They don't always get along. So, just imagining bringing a group of 10 different people, and some units had more than one person. So bringing that many people together to work for a common good and cause, we had to establish and depend on and utilize this new paradigm. Kind of, I say and think of it as utilizing a new language, an emotional language, to resolve conflict, and to show appreciation, and to knit and grow ourselves as individuals and as a community to just build healthier bonds.
Okay, and before I add something to what you just said, Ayinde, did you get a chance to witness that Esusu that your mom was talking about? And if so,
I'm sure it happened, but I don't even remember anything from
he was
less
bored.
than 5 years ago.
He was pretty young.
The benefits, so that's cool, and you know that it exists, so that's something. But before we move on, I wanted to just touch on, you mentioned the Mazimoyos, and their workshop, Warrior Hill Builders. In one of our episodes on mental health and the other one on communication, we discussed them. For any of the people that are listening, this is the couple that we referred to that has a workshop that helps to help you learn how to communicate, which is a very big thing that can help you manage your mental health if you don't know how to communicate. So that's what Mama Yinka was referring to for any of our listeners who are interested in the Matimoyos. That's a local couple here in Atlanta, and they were the ones that she referred to that were working with the Esusu. So cool. All right, so what advice would you give to our listeners about the top 3 things to do and not to do if they have interest in participating in the Esusu?
You want to give yours first?
I couldn't think of 3 because I've never been in one. This is just what I assume it would be like.
It's good
and
to think about that as a young person, because the reality is some young men are not thinking about that at all. So to hear it coming from you is beneficial, because a lot of people want to hear directly from somebody who understands how you all think. So don't worry.
Yeah. So what I originally said was, don't get into an Esusu if you don't have the ability to sustain it. But talking and discussing with my mother, she told me that some people get into Esusu to get the ability to maybe
to build their capacity.
To build their capacity, yes. To build their capacity to be in an Esusu. So, it's not really I don't know, a thing, but it was just something that I thought was interesting. So yeah.
Okay.
And my 3, the 3 things that I would advise, I guess is the way to say it, is to know and trust the people that you are entering the Esusu with. And, I kind of said it before, like we actually, with the one Esusu that I referenced in buying the properties, everybody actually didn't know each other. So, one, if at all possible, know and trust the people, like already have some community and relationship with the people that you're entering with. And also make sure you have some process to build and knit trust in the community on an ongoing basis. And that's whether you already know the people or not. And the process that we had was Warriors, Healers, and Builders that I just can't say enough about. That is, it's really awesome. It's great. It works really well. Again, it was I want to say a 3-year process that we utilized in building the Esusu with the properties. And that I if I had to say one thing that held us together and held us up, it was the Warriors, Healers, and Builders process that had us continue to knit and grow community, even as people lost jobs, relationships went south, and just, as life happened, we were able to stay connected and to help each other. Another point that I think is important is to not necessarily always get into Esusu for the monetary gain. That's kind of a given. Also to join it, I'm about building community and building family. I was born to a really, I think, awesome family, and I look forward to building community and building family with people wherever I go. And I think Esusu is a great way to not only build financially, but build yourself, build your family and community reach to other people. And then my last one, and this was something that came out of that Esusu that I referenced, is to work to actively build your business, build and solidify your business. If you don't have a business, then utilize it as an opportunity to, what are you good at? What do you enjoy? To begin a business. And that was key. Like I said, a few people, some people lost jobs in that process. And part of what we decided and agreed upon in that Esusu is that we would help each other build each other's businesses. So, if you can have a job, you can depend on a job, and I can't necessarily impact you getting a pay raise at your job, right? And one brother in particular, I still refer Eric. He sells and builds and repairs washers and dryers. And I know I referred 12 people to him even since the Esusu has been over. Anytime somebody says anything about a washer and dryer, Eric, and everybody he serviced, I get you his number, girl. He is excellent. So, I was able to, we are able, and, like you could say, hey, Yinka has flowers for Mother's Day. I used to do a food co-op. Hey, everybody eats. Everybody might not eat so healthily, but it'd be good for you, you know, to incorporate more fruits and vegetables in your business. So if you have a business, if you don't have a business, then establish one. And if you do have a business, that's another means and way to help build yourself financially and build community. Because, you know, Eric knows and appreciates that I refer people to him for his business. I can help to stabilize and solidify and help he and his family have some solidarity in their financials. I can't necessarily do that for somebody's job. You know, I can't we as Esusu members can't necessarily make a direct impact on whether or not your job gives you a raise or, you know, you get more money from that. So those are my 3 tips.
Okay, before we move on, I wanted to just touch on 2 things. The first thing is the fact that you mentioned Eric, you know, a specific person who's within your network. We had another episode where we were talking about identifying community and what your network looks like. And so for our listeners who did hear that episode, this is exactly what we're talking about, you know, that it's very important for you to understand who has what and who can do what, you know, in your network, and call on them and actually utilize their business, not just know that Eric is a person who does this business, but you never call him when your washer breaks down and you know that your neighbor, you know, might need that person. Any business that is successful right now is successful because people support it. And it usually starts out by word of mouth and also success rate, you know, so the fact that he's been successful is the reason why people are supporting him. So we hope that our listeners were listening, and anybody who out there might need some, you know, washer dryer repair, we will be sharing his information as well.
Yes,
but the other thing I wanted to ask you about before we moved on is the Warrior Healers Builder. Can you tell us just 3 things for the people who are not familiar with that particular process? What would you say were the main things that you all used? A couple of, you know, some people you said were strangers that were successful from that particular process.
I think overall, just I'm sorry, we decided to come out. Can you all hear us well?
Sure, we can.
You can.
Yeah.
Just I think for everyone, and I think I can say this safely, that we built emotional literacy, and often, like, I know before I was introduced to the process, I didn't think of that as a thing, you know, being able to actually read and know what my emotions are genuinely, just being raised, like, basically it's being able to know and read what you feel. It's emotional literacy. So knowing clearly what it is that you feel, knowing what the message is and how to follow it through, how we interact with each other, and how we, like, if somebody does something that you don't like, addressing their behavior and you know, saying that I don't like this particular behavior, and as opposed to, I know what I often have observed before is an attack on the person personally, so that there's something inherently messed up or wrong with the person, as opposed to, hey, these actions are inappropriate, or I don't like them, or they don't work well for this particular reason. And then, you know, I think another big one was, I said it and I'll say it again, just, you know, the ability to build each other's businesses, to celebrate each other's successes, children, you know, our children knowing each other and building with each other and growing with each other. I think those were some direct successes as a result of us utilizing that process.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And for our listeners, I hope that you will look into the Mazimoyo process that they've created, resource really, that they've created, the Warrior Healers Builder workshop. Because the thing is I'm sure you haven't been able to go to your bank and receive all of that stuff and receive, you know, emotional literacy training with the people you're borrowing money from. You know, I'm sure that it helps with communication though, when you're able to communicate on a certain level. So we definitely want to identify that as a resource and a community resource that if anybody's interested, we want to support it. So we're going to move on to our next question.
Our next question is, within our communities, we consider the tools used within our faith practices as resources. We also consider the people we engage with as resources as well. Let's talk a bit about how you and your son both discuss and navigate through those religious resources, as well as people you rely on for those resources they offer.
So,
Go ahead.
So we, as we were discussing this question, like we don't practice a particular religious practice or faith in our household. We do, we honor our ancestors. We have shrines. We are learning. We know a little and are learning more about traditional African spiritual practices. We meditate. We practice tapping or emotional freedom technique. And overall, we just work to treat ourselves and others with love and care and respect. And just in reference to the question, like we don't necessarily have a religious practice. And so,
I mean, yeah, what you said, we kind of practice being spiritually aware, I would guess. And yeah,
you said something about the people when we discussed it initially. The people that help us in our community.
The people. My aunt is a Ifa priestess, and she invites us to her party, celebration, chances to make offerings, things, all that rolled into one. So yeah, we go there, we make offerings, and yeah,
Okay. All right. Were you gonna say something else, Mama Yinka? Because I don't want to cut you off.
Seems like we had a more expanded answer when we were looking at the question. We wrote a little notes.
It's fine. It's fine. I wanted to chime in on that because for this particular question for Nafis and I, when we were thinking of it, one of the things for us as Muslims and also people who support African traditional religions as well, we utilize tools from all types of faith practices. And one in particular that I support as far as the tools are concerned is Ifa, so I can say that it's definitely been beneficial to know, what types of energies are around you and also what types of energies to avoid. That's one of the tools that I've learned from Ifa. But as far as Islam is concerned, for our listeners who are Muslim, one of the things that we try to do, if we identify as a resource, is what's known as dhikr, and this is like chanting. It's a chanting that you're saying different names of God, or you're saying, repetitively, you're saying this thing over and over, and the whole purpose is it's like an affirmation in a sense. So we utilize that as a resource. And also prayer, is definitely a resource. When you're angry, you find yourself in some heated argument, one of the recommendations that people say is to first go and wash up and prepare for prayer, because it's going to put you in a different mind state. So we try to do that often. And then as far as people, we definitely rely on our community, for all types of things. So my money always is going to go to the folks I know first. And they're usually going to have black skin or brown skin first, because that's just the majority of the people I know here in Atlanta, but that's not to say I don't have some brown skin, Mexican friends or some Latino friends or Indian, whatever, you know what I mean? I support good business. So whoever has it is who I support. It just so happens that in Atlanta right now, my immediate community happens to be people that look like me. Do you want to add anything on that question?
Kind of like in the same regards, like definitely in terms of like religious practices, maybe like a lot of meditation, and also maybe taking time for yourself.
Those are your resources.
And also relying on those resources, like you said, maybe going to the community for different people. Definitely money inside the community is the most important.
Okay. All right, so on our next question.
I'm sorry, it's just one other thing I wanted to add. When you were mentioning chanting, you reminded me about Dr. Fukiao, when you were saying the different names of the creator. I know one thing that he had said that really resonated well with me was that, I know in Islam and in African tradition, like names have meaning. Like we don't just kind of haphazardly name our children and name ourselves. Like our names come with a meaning, and we, give them to our children with purpose and meaning. And I just remember one thing he said was that in terms of like chanting or meditating, that you can utilize your own name to call forth the best of you, to like you're calling on yourself in that repetitive kind of way, and calling forth you. So whatever the like energy and meaning that your parents, you know, put into naming you, if you utilize that as your focus in your meditation or in your chant, then you can help to activate and call forth the very best of what is within you. So I wanted to offer that, because I utilize that sometimes, and it just really resonates, and it is powerful.
I love that. And while you were talking, I was just wondering, before we go into our next question, I want to direct this directly at Ayinde and Nafis. You know, for our listeners who are the sons, you know, of the conversations, I want to know, how do you feel as far as a young man in a family that utilizes, you know, resources in the way that you described? How does that feel, sharing that type of information with your friends? Or do you talk about that kind of stuff with your friends, or is that something you just kind of keep private?
That is a really good question.
Don't you don't have to pretend.
I've never shied away from talking about my spiritual practices.
Okay.
And at the same time, I'm not especially bringing them up with, with enthusiasm.
Okay.
Not to say that I'm not proud and, you know, really, proud of my spiritual practices and what we do to maintain ourselves. But kind of when I'm with my friends, I'm not really in that mindset, in that headspace to be doing things spiritually. So I kind of separate myself. The Ayinde hanging out with his friends, just kind of goofing off and stuff, and the Ayinde that is, you know, meditating and offering. I don't chant, but I chant in my head. The Ayinde that's chanting in his head and the Ayinde that's with his friends are two, not very different people, but they're two different people.
Okay, that's honest, and that's the answer that I wanted. How about you?
For me, I kind of like to keep my friends in the loop of like what I got going on spiritually, and also like to invite them. So like a lot of my close friends, I like to invite them to the masjid to see, like, you know, in a sense, that's me kind of being vulnerable with my spirituality, to show them what I have going on, and also to show them that, you know, this is what I like to do. Like, I like to fast, I like to come here and pray, I like to be innocent. So, you know, that's what I'm offering to people. And I also like to, you know, just to show them, like, you know, this is maybe another way that you could do something like dhikring, or, you know, fasting to get your mind off of something, or to be patient with something. So definitely, I like to incorporate that in my conversations, because spirituality is very important to me and my friends.
Okay, and that's cool. Both of those answers I appreciate, and I wanted to make sure we brought that up for our listeners, for mothers who are having a hard time with trying to offer advice to their young men on how do you keep a balance. Maybe you're a person that's like Ayinde, and you're saying, hey, this is a part of my life that I keep, you know, to myself. This is private, and that's completely fine. And you want to offer your son some advice on how to navigate that, because maybe you didn't know, you know, that's how he'd like to approach it. Or maybe you got somebody like Hafiz who's saying, hey, this is what I got going on, and you want to offer advice. It's good to know ahead of time, you know, what your son has going on, listeners, so that you're not stuck when he comes to you and, you know, he's asking you questions and you like, wait, I never thought about this. I don't know what to say. You know, so that's why I wanted you both to share. And I commend you, young men, you know, for having the stance that you have, period. Because a lot of people are not thinking about this at all. You know, they're just kind of living their lives, or maybe they're practicing a faith practice that they don't necessarily believe in, or they've never really understood, and they're afraid to ask questions because it's just the way their family does things. You know, so we are very much interested in conversation, healthy conversation. So we appreciate you both for sharing your feedback on that.
But I will say that a lot of my friends, there's a lot of overlap in our spiritual practices, because growing up, I went to Afrocentric schools. And so usually the people there practice, Ifa, were Muslim, stuff like that. So I guess when I said there's a separation, there is a definite separation. And usually my friends understand and were actively participating in the type of spiritual things that I did. So,
I understand.
yeah, I just wanted to say that.
The thing is, when we're in community, oftentimes we are doing things together. So it's almost like unspoken communication when you're together and doing the thing, So that's cool too, because the reality is you're with your brothers or you're with your sisters, and y'all are together doing something productive, and that's what matters. But thank you for identifying that, though, for people that were maybe feeling that same way and wanted it to be said. And so for our next question, where did you all learn to navigate your resources, whether they were religious or human resources that we were talking about earlier? And is this an ongoing process for you? Where did you learn how to do that?
So, yes, definitely it's an ongoing process. I would say from my family, the family I was born into, when we were talking earlier, like Ayinde made some, he learned some things about my family that I didn't realize he didn't know. So my parents, my dad who raised me, and my mom, my parents, they initially were like Southern Christian Baptists. And then my dad, he started following Islam, and my mom started being a Jehovah's Witness. Oh. And they actually stayed married until I was like in my 20s. And despite those differences, those, I would say sometimes really big differences. And I don't think that they would say themselves, like that they would characterize themselves as African-centered. And the way that I grew up, my family has what I learned to be, from undergrad and being in community, what I heard and learned of as African-centered practices. That's what I grew up with. And I think maybe it's the Southern, like community building, sharing, showing love and respect, reverence for elders, that type thing. I think it's an African continuity that is, during the time that I grew up in the South, 70s and 80s.
Still true.
It's still true. Okay. I don't see it like I saw it when I was growing up. So it is. It's still true, and I don't see it or experience it the way that I saw it and experienced it as a child. So I would say, that there were a lot of African retentions and continuities that I received growing up in the South during the 70s and 80s. And undergrad, I went to Georgia State and got a degree in African American Studies. A lot of people know about AK. His wife and daughter are over Quilombo Academic and Cultural Institute. He was one of my first mentors, like my first or second semester in undergrad, so he helped me to like deepen and strengthen what I already had and knew as I was growing up, and then to see, where it came from and how it was practiced culturally on the continent. And so as I began, having children and having a family, just continuing what I received in a way that was more definitively African and, being called African, not just, this is how we do and be in its family, because, that's how we do it and be it.
Okay.
I would say my experience has been very different from my mom, because my mom kind of, I want to say she found it because, like you said, there were a lot of African retentions growing up, but I was like born into the community, so it's kind of hard to figure out where I learned, because everything that I learned was part of, just who I am. So it was kind of hard to figure out who specifically taught me what and where and when and who. But, it was the community, which is...
What about your family, bro?
Oh, well, yeah, my family, I love them so much. They taught me like you said, reverence for your elders, respect, love, community, all that from my family, which a lot of my family is Southern. So even if they weren't specifically teaching it from a place of Afrocentrism, they were still teaching it, even if I'm sure they realized, even if they didn't realize they were teaching me, they were teaching me Southern things, which were African things. So yeah, I learned from my family, the community, all that great stuff. Baba Wakesa, even though I didn't realize it while it was going on because I was mad at the world at that time. And so yeah, everybody taught me everything.
How are you?
Kind of along the same answer. Like just my family, like really leaning on my mom just to really understand the faith, leaning on Islam. Because definitely when I was younger, I didn't understand it and how it had an impact on my life. But like now, it has a more of a really great impact, and I'm really seeing like the benefits of being studying it. So I just community too, also the conscious African community, because like she said, just how they do things is definitely beneficial also.
Okay. For our listeners, we want to make sure that you all understand that we consider ourselves African people, and as Africans, there's going to be religious practices that we pull on, and it's nothing wrong with that. You don't have to just stick to, this is all I do, when I consider this to be spirituality. I support my Christian grandmother, and I support her prayers, and I know that I've benefited from those prayers, and I'm still benefiting now that she's an ancestor, from the things that she said before she transitioned. And those were Christian prayers, and then I was raised, Muslim, but my family was very non-traditional in the way that we were raised, which is why we're probably the way that we are now, that we pull on different faith practices. So for any of our listeners who are thinking that we might be confused, we have no confusion in our lives. This is an African way, and we support it totally and 100%. So we want to make sure we said that. And you want to close out with the last question?
And the last question is there any advice you would like to offer our listeners regarding these topics that we have discussed as well?
Anything that we haven't touched on that you all want to share as far as advice when it comes to navigating resources?
So even now, I've been working on it a lot, I think, and I've gotten a lot better. But especially when I was younger, I was very tentative to enter these spiritual and religious places because I kind of felt like I was an outsider. Because, like you said, we don't practice any specific religion. And from that learning and growing, I've kind of figured out that the people in those spaces, as much as they know, they love even more to teach, even if you don't dive headfirst all the way 100% into it, they still want to give you something that you can use. So I would say to listen and to learn and to keep your eyes peeled for these experiences. And yeah, just always be ready to take it in and absorb from these people that know so much.
And I would just like to add, basically to trust yourself. Like for whatever, because we talking about resources, we're talking about spirituality, we're talking about building. And for me, I'm 40 some years old, and I'm still, I know it kind of cerebrally now, and just really settling into knowing and trusting myself, right? And to know and trust that what's good and right and healthy for me is what's good and right and healthy for me. And it might not necessarily match what's good and right and healthy for the next person. And so that just that it's okay for me to trust myself and for my journey, my thoughts, my ideas, my ways to veer and look a bit differently from what the next person's might look like. Yeah, I can't say enough. Just really settling into trusting your internal compass, your internal guidance and knowing. So I add that.
You want to add anything?
I would say to always, in regards to I guess always have an open mind, because when we're receiving stuff about religion or just leaning on those resources, we might hear something that we might necessarily not understand. So always be open to learning something new and trying it, because if you don't try, you would never know how what it is or what that brings to you, and also to have faith in yourself and have faith in that you're able to take on the tasks that's at hand.
Cool.
Okay.
Before we close out, I did want to say that, for the mothers who have been listening, we hope this has been a good segue for you if you haven't started a conversation with your young man or your young daughter or your children or even your family about identifying what resources are as they relate to collective and esusu, the thing that we went over when it comes to putting your money together. You can't expect your children to support and put their money into something as they get older if they don't understand what that looks like and what benefit it offers. Sometimes we just expect our children to understand and to offer their money, and we say, how dare you not give money, to the community, when they don't have any idea what it looks like or what's the benefit of it. So it's good to start the conversations early before, they're approached with that type of thing on their own and being expected to offer their own money that they've worked wherever they work, to something that they might not see an immediate, return from. So that was the purpose of why we had this particular conversation, and we hope that it's been beneficial. This has been another episode of Between Us and Y'all. We want to thank our guests for being here. This has been an excellent conversation, Mama Yinka and Ayinde. We want to thank you for being here. We always encourage our listeners to follow our motto. At the end of the day, work hard, pray hard, love hard, and play hard. Definitely, enjoy your life. And we appreciate you both for being here, and we appreciate everyone for listening. We want to thank you.
Thank you guys for being here.
All right.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
All right. Peace.
Y'all have a good evening.
Too.
All right.
Peace.